Welcome back to your fertility counselor and a warm welcome to this very special Christmas edition. I couldn't be more excited because this is true Christmas for me, but it feels like a birthday, Easter, New Year, whatever you want to call it, because I have a very, very dear friend of mine, Purusha Gordon, here as a special guest for this special edition. And I think I couldn't have asked for more. We had so many adversities. Purusha was traveling. She is a global speaker on stage. She had engagements in overseas in the UK, and she was traveling. We had time zone differences, but we finally made it, and I couldn't be more excited but also more honored to have Purusha here with me today. So let me just share a little bit of background information on how I met Purusha Gordon, as I call her P, was here in Bali. We had planned a simple 1-hour lunch, but that lunch actually turned into a 3-hour soul deep conversation. We spoke about values, beliefs, resilience, and kindness, and what it means to keep choosing love when life doesn't choose ease. And very quickly, it became clear to me that I absolutely wanted P on this podcast because some people don't just tell stories. They carry presence. And P has this rare ability to light up a room simply by being in it. I can honestly say I have never met such a deeply kind soul, someone who holds so much love for others without expectation, without ego, and without needing to prove anything. And her story is so extraordinary. From a woman who once stood on her porch, overweight, holding a sugary coffee in the early morning and smoking a cigarette, to setting off across the Pacific Ocean to break a world record. And not just the women's record, but the man's record too. Just let that sink in for a moment with you. And then against adversity, against doubts, against people who didn't believe she could do it, against the backdrop of COVID, uncertainty, and life's many, many countless obstacles. And yet she did it. So today's episode is not just a conversation, it's a dedication. It's dedicated to anyone facing adversity right now, to those sitting with challenges that feel overwhelming, to those staring at obstacles that feel impossible to overcome. And I honestly couldn't feel more honored or excited to bring this special Christmas conversation to you with my dear friend Purusha Gordon. So make yourself comfortable, relax, sit back, and just enjoy. So let's start. Oh, a very warm welcome to Purusha Gordon here on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas, P.
Merry Christmas to you. You're looking very festive, as is your apartment. How lovely to be doing this on Christmas Day.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. And I know you are in the tropical Bali, so it's quite different than from the coldness here in Europe. But I'm so glad that we made it. And thank you for taking the time to be here with me and with our listeners today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I would love to actually kick off with the question that I ask each and every guest that is on my podcast, which is, what's your favorite morning ritual, P? Can you share that with us?
Yes, absolutely. I love a little 10-minute wake up and breath work session to get me started for the day. It changes my mood from being not wanting to get out of bed, feeling very flat about the day, to all of a sudden feeling energized. And it's just really, really simple. I set my phone with the app the night before. And as soon as my eyes open, I flick it straight on. I have the music playing and I do 3 rounds of deep breathing at quite a rapid pace. And then I do some breath holds and then I do some visualizations. And then 10 minutes later, I'm finished. And as a mum of 2 boys, I find trying to do anything more than 10 minutes before the busyness of the day starts is just really, really difficult. And there's many more other things I'd love to add into my morning routine, but I find that small, little manageable consistency of morning routine like that for me is completely achievable, whether it's a crazy day or not a crazy day, just 10 minutes. So I love that to start the day.
Oh, fantastic. This sounds really great. And that's a great grounding exercise as well. We will talk a lot about like grounding and how to set yourself up for a great day. And you are an expert in breathing and in so many other areas. And I'm so excited to take a deeper conversation, to dive into a conversation with you, P. But for our listeners who maybe don't know you yet, can you please introduce yourself and share with our listeners what's your background and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Purusha Gordon. I'm 47 and I'm an ordinary woman who in her life has done some extraordinary things. I had a career for 20 plus years in the corporate world, delivering and managing events all over the world until COVID arrived. And that was my opportunity to pivot and change my life into my sort of second life career, if you like. It also came at a time when I was given the opportunity to become an adventurer and explorer. And I was part of an all-women's female team to row across the Pacific Ocean, breaking a world record in the process for the fastest females to do the mid-Pacific. And at the same time, it also pivoted me into a career as a motivational speaker. So I now work with businesses and I love working with schools and young people as well. And any kind of organization that needs to hear some of the messages and themes that we're going to talk about today, such as resilience, teamwork, kindness, gratitude, detaching from technology, and all the things that I learn out on the ocean and how those can be applied to everyday life. And I'm also a wellbeing practitioner. I have a love for everything and anything health and wellbeing. And I've settled on breathwork as my chosen platform to actually deliver well-being to the world. So a complete change from being in the corporate events world for 20 plus years, but it's for me now a really lovely career with purpose and energy and wonderful connections. And really, I feel like I'm helping people across the world, which is truly wonderful.
Oh, that is so inspiring. And thank you for sharing that, because I feel that so many people sometimes feel stuck and they don't have the courage actually to pivot like what you did with your career. And it takes a lot of courage actually to do that. What helped you actually to pivot? What do you feel was like that turning point where you said like, this is it. This is like where I'm going now to change. Was there such a moment?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think for me, a couple of things. So when I turned 40, it was actually sort of before that, actually, my journey to turning 40 was a really interesting time for me. I suffered with postnatal depression for 4 years after the birth of both of my children. And I found in those 4 years, I was in the worst health, the worst shape. I was depressed and I felt like I was living in this complete foggy existence, this almost like this parallel world that didn't really exist. And every time I left the house, I'd have to kind of put on this persona of this person that I didn't ever really know who they really were, but they were just trying to kind of survive through each day. And there was a moment in a cold January morning when I was stood on my front doorstep and I was drinking a really large coffee. I was a sugar addict and I was actually smoking as well at the time. And the children woke up before they were supposed to. You know, they usually routinely woke up at 6 o'clock and it was 5:30 and they'd woken up. And my heart sank in that moment. But I also realized in that moment, as my heart was sinking, and wishing that they weren't waking up and that was my time that I'd earmarked for myself, I also knew that I was wishing away their life. And I would blink, they'd be 18 and they'd left home and I would have missed the whole thing. And so I knew that I had to make this change in my life to refine the person that I was. I was always really sporty at school. I was always the one who had lots of energy. And I was this kind of person in this vehicle. I was overweight and unhealthy. And it was this sort of vehicle that was carrying this person that I didn't recognize, the body I didn't recognize, the mind I didn't recognize. And so I went off on a detox retreat for a week. And I learned about the power of rest and the power of nutrition and food. And that really kickstarted my love of health and well-being. So I trained in positive psychology and nutrition, biomedicine, breath work, and all sorts of things. Anything that I could really absorb, I was interested in understanding what was the connection between the mind and the body, and what different things could we do to actually get ourselves out of some of the kind of modern day stresses that we live in. So that took me forward until I was 40. And when I turned 40, instead of having a great big party and a great big celebration, I decided to try and rebuild some of my self-esteem and some of my confidence, because I'd lost a lot of this during that period. And so I took on 40 new experiences in my 40th year. And that really, whether I was any good at them or not any good at them, they weren't all kind of crazy physical challenges. It was anything from wing walking, bungee jumping, skydiving, right through to learning how to sail a boat and trying new foods for the first time, right through to doing a marathon, and all these kind of different experiences. And one of them was being a life model. For a drawing class, for a friend of mine who used to run this class. And it was really that year that I started to rebuild and rebuild not just my confidence and my self-esteem, but I really started to refine kind of who I was and the things that I love doing. And it didn't matter whether I was any good at doing any of these challenges or experiences. It was just that I said yes to them and that I gave it a go. And whatever the outcome was, I was going to learn something. I was going to meet people. I was going to become stronger and more resilient at the end of it, because I was trying something that was pushing me outside of my comfort zone. And it's why I'm a real believer that when we push ourselves outside of our comfort zone, we actually grow as people, because difficult things are going to come our way every single day. And we live in a world now where it's rapid fire. Every day, things are coming in all the time to our lives. And we need to do difficult things to put ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So I think for me, that was one part of this pivotal change, was that I started to believe that I was capable of more than I ever thought I was really capable of. And obviously that then led me into the rowing. But it was also a time where, just as I had turned 40, just after I turned 40, COVID hit. And that was something that completely turned the world upside down. And it could turn my life upside down as well. I was running a really successful business. I had a big team of people. We were delivering 350 events for our corporate clients all over the world. We were traveling, and it was like a light switch just flicked, and that was it. Everything cancelled. And we thought, well, is it going to be 3 months? Is it 4 months? Is it 6 months?
Mm.
And so we were living in this kind of this limbo for a really long time. And it actually turned out to be more than 3 years before any business events, particularly in the UK, were even allowed to take place. And so it was a really difficult time. And I think because I'd spent that my 40th year really building up my resilience, I felt like I was able to cope with this life-changing, world-changing event that we'd been presented with. And so first of all, I pivoted our business. I said, right, well, if we can't deliver events in person, let's deliver them online. And we set together a series of well-being events, because we really felt that people were isolated at home, people were lonely, people were living, like particularly in the UK, when you have young people, they quite often live in shared houses. They were working out of bedrooms. They were disconnected from family, friends. Nobody was allowed outside. And so people were isolated. And so we put together this series of events, and we just reached out to different people we knew. And then all of a sudden, all these people kept coming to us saying, look, I'm somebody that talks about resilience. I'm somebody that talks about life coaching. I'm somebody that talks about living your dreams. I'm somebody that does yoga classes, exercise classes. And all of a sudden, we built this daily schedule of events, and we called it Motivation in Isolation. And with the idea that we were bringing people together and we were connecting them digitally. And this was before, this was pretty much the birth of Zoom. And this was before kind of online events were even a thing. So we were quite early adopters of that. And I think in some ways for me, that was also my therapy. So I was hosting all of these events. I was the event host. I'd never been an event host before. I'd always been the person pulling together the events. And I'd seen event hosts and speakers and all these kind of things. And all of a sudden the table had turned. So this was me having to adapt, but it was also this therapy for me. I got to listen to all these incredible and amazing people. And so from that, I really felt that actually well-being was something I could see how much it benefited and helped people. And even if it was just one person that it made a difference to, I knew that that was a path that I really wanted to try and follow. And so that's when I started studying much more in the health and well-being world. And finally, just what else helped me pivot was, and I don't know if you've ever done this exercise, but it's, have you done the Ikigai exercise, where you're finding your Ikigai? It's a Japanese term.
Yeah.
So you draw 4 squares on a piece of paper. And again, in one of the events that we did, somebody did this exercise about finding your Ikigai. And it's all about, what are you good at? What do you want to get paid for? What do other people think you're good at? And what does the world need more of? And you write all of these things in these different boxes. And then when you start to pick out the words from each of those 4 corners, it brings together something that you can do later on in life. And that for me was all about the world needs healing and the world needs people to help them. And I have a voice and a platform. And so that's how I then transitioned into more things and more work in the well-being world through my health coaching. And then obviously I did my big expedition, which was this row across the Pacific Ocean. And again, that came about purely by chance, by talking to somebody on an aeroplane who was doing the media coverage for the Atlantic rowing race. And I said, oh, I've heard of that race. But isn't that for sort of elite athletes and, you know, celebrities? It's not for ordinary people. And she said, no, this is regular people taking on this extreme challenge. And so I went to the finish line, and the first people I saw were 2 men in their 70s who just rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowing boat. And I thought, wow, this is truly inspiring. And I said out loud, I think I'd like to row an ocean, after a few days of, you know, meeting various people who'd completed the challenge. And then you say that kind of thing out loud, and you find yourself all of a sudden, you know, part of a team. And that's really where it went from there. So without any rowing experience and without any sea nautical experience, I then pulled together a team to row across the Pacific Ocean. which was just something I never thought I'd have ever been capable of. But yeah, I took that on.
Wow. And this is so, so truly inspiring. And you touched on a couple of topics that I would really love to follow up now, because you talked about this growth mindset, transformation, but also resilience, trust, and kindness, which I believe there is so much potential in this world. And so many people actually are looking exactly for these areas, isn't it? Yeah. So you were part of a team of 4 when you set off for your expedition. Was there a particular role that was like allocated to each of you, or like in terms of like the character personality, or because you said like that you put together the 4 of you, the team, right? So how did you actually select those that that were suitable for the team?
So this is what's so interesting, and I think naivety on my part played a huge a huge part in this, because I was invited originally to be part of a team to row across the Pacific Ocean, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden that team fell apart. Somebody was moving to the other side of the world. Somebody decided they didn't want to do it. I had told all my friends and family I was 100% rowing across the Pacific Ocean. But I didn't all of a sudden have a team, because people, for their own reasons, COVID had turned everybody's lives upside down. And I think this is where, through those 40 challenges, I built this resilience to say, well, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try. And this is when I came up with this mantra of I can do this and I will do this. And this is a mantra that I still say to myself on a daily basis when I'm faced with something that's really challenging, whether that's parenting or work situation or a social situation, whatever it is. I say I can do this and I will do this. And so what happened is I connected with anyone who was in the ocean rowing world, and I said, I found a sponsor. We have a boat, but I have no experience. Is there anyone who'd like to row an ocean with me? And ordinarily, most people would go, absolutely no way. But I think the attraction that we'd already found the funding, because it's really hard to fund these kind of expeditions, and the fact we had a boat and we made some plans, it was quite interesting for people. And so I just got connected with various people in the ocean rowing world. And the first girl I spoke to was Bella, and she ended up being my cabin buddy. And we are such close friends now to this date. And she had her own COVID challenges. She was stuck in America. She had to pack up her life in a week and move back to the UK, and then was living on her own. So it all came about at a time where I think the world was in crisis and people were looking to connect and to take on, have a kind of shared goal. And the way that we really led our campaign, because we couldn't meet in person during COVID. And so we had to meet on Zoom every single week. And we would meet on a Monday and say, well, what is the one step that we can take, or what is the one task that we can do this week that is within our control? When so much is out of our control and the world is in crisis and everybody's in crisis, and there are things that we cannot control and we don't know what the outcome will be, what is the one thing that is within our control this week that inches us forward to the start line? Because we were dealing with lots of people saying to us, well, you're never going to make it because the Olympics have been cancelled, every major sporting event's cancelled, we're all in lockdown, travel is banned. Why do you think you're going to row across the ocean? And so you're dealing with you're dealing with other people's reactions and other people's thoughts. And it's quite hard to kind of not let yourself be absorbed by that. And so we had to just remain really strong in our convictions that we didn't know whether we would make the start line or not. We didn't know whether we would get into America. We didn't know if the borders would be lifted. We had no clue at all. But what we did know is that we were 4 people who were going to try. And we just said, we can do this and we will do this. And so we just kept trying without really knowing what the outcome would be. And so I think by overcoming all those obstacles and hurdles that are presented with us in life, I think the more that you can face difficult things and challenges and things that present themselves on a daily basis, and you can say, I don't know whether I'm going to succeed or this or not, but I'm going to try, and I can, and I will. And that's generally how I approach a lot of things now, because there's so much that we don't know. And so I think the way that we approached it was, we're going to try. I had no experience. I managed to find a team who did have experience. That, you know, they wanted to take on another ocean rowing crossing. And so how we divided up the roles it was almost quite naturally, it became quite natural how it happened. So I had led a lot of the campaign work. I had the relationship with the sponsor who I had worked with previously. I'd found the boat. My natural key skills were kind of communication and marketing and team dynamics and motivation. And then we had, Mary, who was not really happy, sort of being not happy, but she wasn't really keen to kind of take on any of the the kind of front speaking roles, but she wanted to get everything ready on the boat, and she made sure that health and safety was ticked off. And when you're doing an extreme adventure like this, and you're in a very hostile environment at the mercy of Mother Nature, you really have to make sure that you've got every single piece of safety equipment, that it's working. And if in emergency, you want to make sure it's working. So she got everything ready with the boat. She was in charge of safety. She was in charge of navigation. And so our roles kind of just seemed to naturally occur based on our skill set, what we were good at. We had Lily, who was our strongest rower, and we had to make sure that, she had loads of rest, because, she was the one that when we didn't have currents and wind, she was going to help kind of propel us forward, with her strength. But, she was the sleepiest on the boat. So, it take loads of energy to wake her up each time. And she was also probably the calmest and the quietest person on the boat. So when there was conflict, she'd always be this person who would just kind of quietly observe and then support as and when was needed. Because you're 4 headstrong women living on an 8.5 by 1.5 meter boat. It's a really tiny space. And we were trying to challenge the women's world record, which is 50 days. So we were at sea for a long time. And so, lots of conflict and things came up. But I think because we each had our roles, rather than just having one person who was our skipper and our leader, and that all the responsibility was on them, we shared it out, and we were really clear who was responsible for what and in what situation.
Yes. You mentioned something that really that I picked up, which was like, we kept trying, not knowing what the outcome was going to be. And I think that's something that happens to all of us. So when quitting was tempting for you, maybe there were some moments, I'm not sure, but like, what was the inner conversation that you started to have?
Yeah, I've got this kind of unusual ability to never give up, which I know lots of people don't have that, but I have this kind of unusual ability that I have to see everything through no matter what. And in some ways, my downfall is never knowing when to stop. But I hear what you're saying, and I think there were definitely times where it felt too difficult and it felt too hard, and there were too many voices saying, just put it on hold. Don't worry about it. When we're homeschooling children and businesses are failing, people are lonely and on their own, there are definitely times where you thought, is this going to really be worth it? And I think for us, we just kept that vision of what would it look like getting across the finish line? What would that feel like? And if that feeling was worth the effort now, then we would keep going. And so that's how we really kept going. One, with that mantra of, I can do this and I will do this. And we just broke that down into little tasks. And then we really kept that visualization of, what would it feel like? What does it look like standing on that finish line? And for us, it wasn't even just about being world record stakeholders. It was about the friendship, and it was about the journey, and it was about the shared experience and how we'd overcome so much. That's what it would feel like, that kind of elation on the finish line. And so I think that that visualization piece was really, really key to keeping the motivation going. I think also we all had highs and lows, and we definitely had highs and lows when we were out on the ocean. I was seasick constantly for 4 days. And at one point I thought, just take me now. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And it was then that Bella started writing little notes on the cabin wall. So she would write, I would be feeling awful because I couldn't row at night, and my team would have to row more shifts, and they would be more tired and more exhausted. And she just would write little notes saying, we believe in you, you've got this, or get better soon. We're all, we're here for you, or we love you. And it was just those words of encouragement where you feel as though either you're not playing your part, or that you've done something wrong, or that you're a failure. I mean, I definitely felt like a failure in those moments, and that even though I'd pulled the whole thing together and got us there, that didn't matter. It was like I wasn't playing my part. I wasn't showing up on that day, and I just wanted to give up. But her words of encouragement were so powerful, and they were enough to help me through. And then when I stopped being sick, all of a sudden that shifted, because she was the one that had held so much. She'd held the team energy, she'd held the she held the kind of the shift pattern and the motivation. And when I came back on deck and said, right, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm feeling good, I can take this on, she crumbled and collapsed. And so both her and I have talked about this a lot ever since, actually. And we almost refer it to almost being life a bit like batteries. And sometimes your batteries are on low, and sometimes your batteries are on high. And actually, it's thinking, I'm not just a solo battery on my own. The people who I'm around are also batteries, and they have different energy levels. And so if my energy levels are low, it's being connected enough and vulnerable enough and okay enough to be able to say to people, do you know what? I'm not firing on all cylinders today. I haven't got the energy. How are your batteries doing? And they say, great, I can hold you in this space. I can take this on for, today or tomorrow or whatever. And so you've got these fluctuating levels. And so I think when things were really tough, because we had some tough moments on the ocean, it was just that fluctuation. And we would just be honest enough and vulnerable enough with each other to say, I'm really struggling today. And somebody else would say, I've got you. Leave it with me. And it would be, and whatever that was, whether it was making food for you or giving you an extra 5 or 10 minutes rest or whatever it may be, because it's tiny little things out on the ocean. And that's how we developed this culture of kindness within the team as well. We all of a sudden recognized that we were working better as a team that was really cohesive and that was really there for each other. And when I was rowing one night, I listened to a podcast by Dr. David Hamilton, who I think is absolutely amazing. He's written this fantastic book called Why Woo Woo Works. And he's a chemist. So he's got a really interesting scientific background. And he really started to do research experiments into the placebo effect. And, what was this placebo effect? And one of the research studies he did was around the power of kindness. And he talks about one random act of kindness going on to impact 125 people. Because the recipient of the act of kindness is more likely to go on and be kind or kinder to a further 5 people during their next day. And those 5 people are more likely to go on and be kind or kinder to a further 5. And so you get the pebble effect of the random act of kindness to 125 people. But not only that, but the giver of the random act of kindness has this elevated sense of self in terms of the positive feelings that come about having given a random act of kindness. And so when I'd listened to this podcast, I said, girls, the next day I was like, we're doing this thing around kindness. And we don't even know. And I mean, we didn't have 125 people on the boat. But what we did notice was actually if we started our day with daily gratitude, so we would each say one thing to one other teammate that we were grateful from the last 24 hours. And again, we really had very limited things that we could be grateful for. So whether it was you made food or, 5 minutes early on shift or somebody took on one of your tasks or jobs, those really nice gratitudes and the kindness that comes about as a result of that, it makes you feel better. All of us feel better. And so then you're pushing forward in the right direction. And when conflict comes up, it makes you feel like, actually, I don't really like that conflict. I don't like that feeling. I don't want to be stuck here. So then you really work hard to resolve the conflict quite easily by spending more time focusing on being grateful to each other, being kind to each other. You're giving more positive energy to each other and to the tasks at hand than you are negative. And it means that for us as a team, that meant we were going faster and it meant we were making more miles because we were more intrinsically motivated. So it's it's scientifically proven, which I think is just completely fascinating.
So in a sense that it's scientifically also proven how it actually enhances your performance. Is that what you're saying? Like from, being kind and feeling grateful for little things every day, and then how that actually translates into output.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, for us, it was about performance because it was how we were performing. We were trying to break a world record, so we needed to go as fast as we could in each 24-hour period. So from a performance perspective, yes, but actually in terms of oneself and well-being, I mean, it's scientifically proven that actually if you are energetically more connected and you are focused more on positive behaviors between teammates, that makes you more cohesive and more connected as a team, which means that if you're more cohesive and connected and you understand each other more and you're more grateful, then you're likely to perform better. And that's why with a lot of high performing, teams, you do get lots of kind of psychologists involved now in sports psychology. And what is it about not just the individual's performance, but actually the performance as a team? Because when it's around the growth mindset. So when you're looking at moving forward cohesively as a team, and you're looking at what you can do to support your other teammates, then you're working more as a team than an individual. And that's particularly important in team sports, such as, the one that we were doing. And it means that conflict is easier to resolve. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm just thinking of, there are so many people that actually, yes, they are working within a group or they live within a family, but we also have lots of people that are actually on their own. So my two questions to you would be like, would you have any insights for our listeners, for those that are more on the giving side? Like, how is it when you constantly are the person who gives and provides and gives the kindness and the caring and everything, and your partner or with whomever you spend your life together doesn't necessarily give that back? That's one question. And the other question would be like, how would it be for people that are on their own? We have lots of people who live in an isolated way, who maybe because they prefer it, but also maybe because the circumstances are like that, that they are sitting alone at home on a Christmas day, like today. Like what could be some insights or sharings from your experience that could maybe help them to charge their batteries, like what you said, because you were mentioning about like you charge your batteries, then your battery goes maybe flat, but you have someone else with a charged battery that can give you that energy, and it seems so beautiful. But then being also conscious about like, you have your own battery, maybe someone else is just like taking the energy of your battery, but doesn't necessarily help you to bring it up again. And so how do you develop the capability to fill also your own battery?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. I think it's probably something that we're all working on all of the time. In
Yeah.
the UK, we have terms for these people, the people who deplete your batteries all the time. We call them mood hoovers, and
Okay.
you know, and you will always be faced. I think the reality is you'll always be faced with people in life who do deplete your batteries all the time, and you give and you give and you give, and it's just
Mm,
a case of taking. Something personally that I've really been trying to work hard on this year is giving without expectation, and
mm,
it's a really difficult thing to do, because we
mm,
all have so many expectations of all the things that we either
mm,
want to achieve or that we would like. And if we live in a world where we just expect everything for ourselves, then we don't live in a world where we're giving. And
mm,
so one of the things that I've been trying to work really hard on particularly is giving without expectation. And that means that you fully give freely from your heart, and you give
mm,
because you want to. There's also boundaries. And so if
mm,
you are constantly giving to people who are constantly taking, and you don't feel any sense of um, lift for yourself by giving, there's putting a boundary around that and really asking yourself the question of, actually, is this somebody who is adding anything to my life? And that's not because you're expecting anything from them, but actually if they are just somebody that is solely for themselves and they are not in any way giving, then is that somebody who's really going to be there for you at a time perhaps when you need it? And so
mm,
boundaries are something I'm sure you probably talk about a lot with your clients all the time. And
mm,
it's really difficult. It's difficult for all of us. But I think those would be the things that if I was reflecting, I'd be really giving without expectation and giving freely. And whether that's you're on your own, and it doesn't have to be giving to people that it can be, it's simple things for me. I always find that we live in a world where we're so disconnected. We're
mm,
connected more than we've ever been because of technology, but we're the most humanly disconnected we've ever been. And so people
mm,
who are on their own for Christmas, or who are living on their own, or they feel isolated from the world, or maybe they work from home all the time, it is really difficult. And so connection can come in many forms, and it doesn't always have to come from friends and family. But even for
mm,
me, the things where I feel connected to humanity is if I'm traveling. I will always, if I'm sitting on a train or I'm sitting on a bus or I'm sitting on a plane, I will always engage and chat to the person who's next to me, because you don't know who
mm,
they are, what story they've got. I always say to my
mm,
children, as they want to have their heads in their phones because they're drawn in by these games all the time. I always say, look up and look
mm,
around you, and look at that person going past on a motorbike. Where do you think they're going? What's their story? What is that
mm,
stuff they're carrying on the back of the bike? Where are they taking it for the day? And when you start to be kind of curious about humans, that's when you, even if you are living on your own, or feeling isolated, you can start to feel more connected to other people.
mm,
If I go and have
mm,
a coffee in a coffee shop, even if I'm getting a takeaway, I will always ask the person, "How are you today?" Because nobody
mm.
ever asks the barista. Nobody. They just say flat white, oat milk latte, whatever it is they want, and they reel off the list of, syrup shot and blah, 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 all of that. And yes, that person is there to serve them, and they are there to make their coffee for them, but they're also human. We're not at the
Mm,
stage where we've fully automated machines to do all these kind of things for us. And so what's the harm in asking them, how is your day? And that doesn't mean you
mm,
have to receive if their day's terrible, or you don't have to be carrying the weight of whatever it is for their day. But actually, more often than not, you'll probably find, oh, that's a really nice question to ask. And so
mm,
I think when you're isolated, it's easy to feel like I'm isolated and I'm on my own. But actually, what about how can I connect with humans on another level, whether it's just a surface level, or how can I meet people and hear what other stories other people have? Because quite often we'll think that our lives are really, really difficult. And there are other people who have other, challenges out there in life too. And sometimes just asking somebody how their day's going can make
Yes.
you feel good and can make them feel better too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. And I think also, beside having or setting boundaries, I think another softer approach could also be to really look at the choice that you have in your life. That's what I discuss a lot with my clients. You can really choose. Like if you set the valve each and every day to 0, and then you have a choice between like what helps you to bring you towards who you want to become and what actually pulls you away from who do you want to become. It's really very helpful to just recalibrate once in a while again and just look at like what kind of choice do I have here? Like what are my choices? And people love choices. Humans love choices. Not too many, but they love choices. I
Absolutely
feel.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned just before about like this moment of this presence when you have like one stroke at a time. And I feel that especially leading up to Christmas and leading up to the end of the year, we are often in this overwhelming state of mind where we have so many things going on and we all want to wrap it up and wrap up the year and whatever. And I feel like that really like what you mentioned about like one stroke at a time really helps you to bring yourself back. How do you, what you experience on the ocean, how do you bring that approach back into your daily life to really be present in a time where it can be really overwhelming and very distracting?
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. We live in a world where we are going at rapid fire pace for everything. The world is just moving so fast. And I
Mhm.
think I feel so privileged to have had this incredible opportunity to
Mm.
almost dial back to really understanding what pace of life humans are truly capable of. And when you're
Mhm.
out on a tiny little rowing boat and you're rowing 3,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean and you can't see land within, 24 hours of leaving and 24 hours of arriving, you would just see ocean the whole time. You feel so insignificant in that moment because and you realize the world is so vast. But I think you also realize what you're what you're capable because you're so disconnected from this crazy life that we live on land. Everything is fast paced, whether it's email, social media, messages, text messages, people talking to you at rapid fire pace. We've picked up the pace of the way that we speak and the language that we use and the amount of words we use and the expectations of when things should be delivered, and we've almost gone too fast for actually how the pace of that humans can keep up with. When you're on a rowing boat, you're rowing, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're doing a few little jobs along the way, and then you're repeating that cycle. And we would row 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And so what happens is the challenge isn't just about the physicality of getting from A to B. The challenge is really keeping your mind strong because your
Mm.
body will keep going no matter
Mm.
what. If you say to your body, you can't stop until you get there because you haven't got an engine, and the only way you're going to stop is if a big shipping container comes and rescues you because you say you don't want to do it anymore. That's about the mind and keeping the mind strong. And the challenges that we face in everyday life now are that we're so bombarded with so much information and overwhelm that we can't think straight. And so,
Mm.
therefore, our bodies then feel tired and exhausted. But actually what's happening is we've got too much going on for what we're able to process. And so when we were rowing, we were really living this life of presence. We were there in the moment. And whether that moment was seasickness, whether that moment was, cooking food, or whether that moment was having a conversation with our teammates, when you're rowing, your feet are strapped in, your hands are on the oars. There's no multitasking going on. You're either rowing and you're sitting with your own thoughts, or you're sitting, rowing and conversing with the person that you're rowing with. That is it. You can't cook your supper and answer emails and sort out your children's schedule for the next day and, run the iron over, your skirt or blouse for the next day. There's none of that. It's one thing at a time. And when you're resting, you are sleeping and you're resting because there's nothing else to do because you've done your jobs. And so when you dial back and you think, gosh, that feels like a pace where I am truly at one with myself, even though you're in an extreme environment, even though you're in this deeply kind of physical and mental challenge, it's probably the most present I have ever felt and truly at one with who I am in that moment when I was out there on the ocean. And so the way that I've now translated that into life and the things that I continue to work on each year are disconnecting from technology. That would be my absolute first number one that I would say to anybody, is really look at how much time you are spending on technology. It's unavoidable for everyday life now. But actually, I would never spend time on technology when there's an opportunity to connect with people in person. So when my kids are around, I put my phone aside and I engage in the conversation all the time with them. If they need my attention, I remove that device. I've taken away all badges and icons. I have my phone permanently on silent. Because again, another research paper I read when I came back from the ocean was that the color red is the most addictive color. And those little round badges that sit on all the apps we have on our phone, they are designed to draw our attention to them because they want to steal our focus and steal our attention. So on average, when we pick up our phone, it takes us on average 23 minutes to get back to the original task that we picked up our phone to do, because we become very distracted. And so all of this kind of distraction and overwhelm can really lead to this kind of feeling of physical exhaustion all the time. And so what I really noticed is that when we put ourselves in this extreme, challenging physical and mental expedition, I felt like I had more energy than sometimes I do with life on land. And so it was really trying to understand, how did I have more energy? How could I row for 12 hours in a day? How could I only live on 90 minutes sleep, in five 90-minute sleep cycles in a 24-hour period? And how could I keep going? And it was because the pace of life on land is way more exhausting to the human body than it is when you dial everything back. And so those, I think, for your listeners, those would be my real recommendations about what is the noise in life that is surrounding you. What are the things that make you feel exhausted and tired and overwhelmed and busy? And how can you start to put some boundaries around that? We talked a bit about, mood hoovers and the people who don't necessarily serve you anymore. And it can sound quite harsh and quite difficult, but actually, if they're not adding anything, that's something else that's just depleting your energy and your reserves and your batteries all the time. With work, can you put boundaries around it? Corporations are thriving on the fact that we work from home because we have no boundaries around work anymore. And there's none of this go to work at 9 o'clock, pick up your computer when you're there. Or, when I started working, there were no computers. And they say, finish at night at 5 p.m. and go home. And then you're into your own time. We have devices that keep us connected to our work at all times. And this is great for corporations, but it's not great for us as individuals. And I know with all the work that you're doing, you're really trying to help people kind of with their overwhelm, their exhaustion, their focus, and, to really try and, help them, become well. And these are some of the things that, in my experience of being in an extreme environment, that really dialed back what the human body and mind is truly capable of, is it's really actually quite simple. But modern day life makes it way more complicated and way more exhausting. And so each year, I really try and reflect on that at the end of the year, and really think at the beginning of the year, what are the things that I'm going to make changes to that are going to really help me in my next year ahead, that will make me feel less busy, less exhausted, and less overwhelmed? And is it people I need to change? Is it my own practices? You asked what was my morning routine. For me, that was this year. I love breath work. I know the benefits of breath work. I teach breath work. And yet, for me as a practitioner, I wasn't ring fencing time for me. So I said, well, that has to change. So I ring fenced the 10 minutes and dropped something else. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is like really think about the things that make you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and busy. And can you make a change around those? And it's not easy.
It is not easy, actually, to make changes. And there are people always like, me, I am a slow adapter to change. My husband is a very fast adapter. So it can sometimes be overwhelming in itself. But I think it's worth it. As you said, like, growth starts usually in the zone where it's out of your comfort. And that's where change happens, actually. And I strongly believe that it really helps you to transform to whomever you want to become. So talking about that visualization piece, like really seeing, like, and feeling it, how it will be like when you get there, when you get through the finish line, I think that's so, so powerful. That's really powerful and has a lot of transformation in it. So I was wondering, because this was must have been so highly transformative for you, P. The person who started, the Purusha Gordon, who set off for that adventure, and the one who actually arrived in Hawaii. What was the transformative change? What was the biggest transformative change that you took away from that experience and that you still live today?
Few things. I think, I've definitely talked about some of them. I think, the power of kindness and gratitude and appreciation for others. The technology was a huge one for me, because it was the night before we came into Hawaii, where we used to listen to podcasts and music at night just to keep the noise down on deck while the others were sleeping. And we'd got so close to the Hawaiian Islands that we started to pick up signal. But because we didn't ever have anything on signal, because we were so far away at sea, the only device I had left that had any music and podcasts left on was my phone, because everything else had broken on the way across. And so I switched it on, and it was the physical reaction that I saw to my body, the panic, as 1,492 WhatsApp messages flooded in as I switched on my phone to get my playlist ready for my shift. And physically, my heart started racing. I felt sweaty. I was almost having a panic attack, because I really was questioning, what had I missed? Had something happened with family, friends? What was this major news and major drama that had happened? And I couldn't speak to my husband because of the time difference. And when I spoke to him the next day, I said, what happened? I had to switch off my phone. I had such a physical reaction to it that I couldn't continue. I rode in silence for the next 2 hours. And he said, oh God, it's all absolute nonsense. It was, someone's lost their sock, or what's this, where's the school teddy gone? Or does anyone want to donate to end of teacher year presents? Or, has somebody seen that, there's a tree down on the lane that we all live in? And so a lot of it was just this people sharing information without information being asked for. And the recipients of that are all the people that sit on these WhatsApp groups. So I think the real change was definitely from a technology perspective, as I've spoken before. But I think it was also the realization that we are all more capable of things than we ever think we are. And it's about the body. We always think that we're tired because the body feels tired. We're exhausted because the body feels exhausted. And actually, it's not. It's our mind telling us that. And so, if anything, I think the crossing really made me realize that our bodies are strong, our bodies are resilient, they are very, very capable. But we have to really train our minds to tell ourselves, tell ourselves that we can do this. And that's why the mantra of I can and I will, I can, I will is something that I use every day. Because your mind will tell you you can't do something before your body will. And so that is what stops us. Our mind will say, I'm not going to do that because I don't feel comfortable, or I feel afraid, or I feel tired. But that's not your body telling you that. That's your mind. And so when we are faced with so many challenges and difficult things that we have to face on a daily basis, and so much kind of overwhelm, it feels easy to just say, I'm actually not going to do that because it feels too difficult, or I don't think I'm capable of doing that, because we're either fearful of either the reaction we'll get, or maybe even failing. And failure is not something to be afraid of. It's how we learn and grow if you take the lesson from the thing that you don't succeed in. And so I think the biggest thing that I learned in that crossing was, if you'd asked me when I was depressed, smoking, drinking coffee, sugar addict, and overweight, was I ever capable of rowing across an ocean and not just breaking a women's world record, but also breaking a men's world record? I'd have said absolutely no, never, ever, ever in a million years would I have ever been capable. That's because my mind was telling me that I wasn't. And so it's about, over the years, over the days and the weeks and the months, taking that little step every day of saying, well, what can I do today that inches me forward in a positive direction, or takes me somewhere in life where I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know what the destination is, but I know that I don't want to be stuck where I am. And that's what I encourage people to do all the time, is just make one little positive change. And it can be tiny, and it could be connecting with your barista who's made you a coffee. It could be going to a gym class that you've always wanted to go to, but you've been too afraid because you don't know whether you're going to fit in or not. It might be asking, to change job at work, but you're too fearful because you don't feel like you have the experience. It's putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and just trying something. Because quite often you will actually be really surprised at people's reaction. If you ask for help, or you say you want to try something new, you'll find people are like, yeah, great, perfect, let's do that. Let me help you. Of course, yes. Yeah, why not give that a try? Brilliant. That's so brave of you. But it's our mind. It's our mind that tells us we can't do these things. So that I think was my biggest learning of, definitely the noise on land is noisy, and how can we then dial that back into everyday life and try and find the peace, so that our bodies can recover. And then, always tell yourself that you are capable of doing something, and that your body will pull you through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that way of how to work with the power of mind, really. And sometimes I must admit that sometimes, you are in a fantastic shape and you feel like, wow, I'm feeling really powerful and strong today. And sometimes I wake up and I feel like, oh, I can't think straight, or I can't even imagine myself pulling through the day, to be really powerful with my mind. And that's where I think it's really, really important on how to get it on the right foot, because that's when you start yourself, to put yourself down, potentially, or to blame yourself, or to see yourself as a failure. And I think that's really, really important what you said, to take it as a lesson, rather than, as a failure. I think that's a real important viewpoint, to be kind to yourself in such moments. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think absolutely. And I think when I was Well, when I was struggling with depression, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think, anybody who suffers with, mental illness or depression, it's not something that ever leaves you in life. And it is completely
Mm-hmm.
possible to have dips. And, my life, the same as yours, there are days where I feel like I can't do this anymore. I feel totally overwhelmed and exhausted. And I think the thing that I have really honed in on, and it's taken me a long time to get there, is I have the key things that make me feel better. What are the
Mm-hmm.
things, without question, that will always lift my mood and will make me feel more energized and happier in moments where I can't be? And for me, it's nature, being
Mm-hmm.
outside in nature, whether that's on the ocean or by the sea, on a beach, or in the trees, in mountains, walking in the countryside, wherever it is, I get out in nature. And even on those days when you don't feel like you really want to, I will force myself, because I will always feel better. One, because you're exercising, and we all know that exercise, it circulates those feel-good hormones around your body. And two, we also know that looking at blue and green spaces are also good for our well-being. And I think you only have to spend probably about 20 minutes, something like that, staring at green or blue. And I'm not talking blue
Mm-hmm.
light here, but blue ocean or green in nature, and that elevates our feeling of well-being. I also know that nutrition is really important for me. And if I eat really kind of naughty, sugary foods or whatever, it's never going to make me feel any better. But actually, I make myself have these kind of good, nutritious foods. And then the next one is connection. And that is always, always, I would say, out of all of them, nature connection, I would go to first above anything else. Because if you can go and connect with somebody, they will instantly make you feel better. Because if you go to them and say, I'm not having a very good day, they'll
Yeah.
be like, oh, come and tell me all about it. And actually, maybe you just even offload, or maybe they just give you a hug and you say, I don't want to talk about it, I just need a hug, and then
Yeah.
they'll give you a hug. And so instantly, I think, those are the things that I would go to when I can't,
Mm.
when I have a day when I just can't, I would connect with somebody who I know is going to make me feel better, and who I can be vulnerable enough to say, I'm not having a great day, but I don't want to talk about it. And for them to just be like, okay, let's go, and being out in nature. And even if you haven't
Yeah.
got anybody and you are on your own, just go outside into nature and then just say hello to somebody that you walk
Mm-hmm.
past. Say, hello, good
Yes.
morning. And they'll be like, oh, hi,
Mhm.
good morning. Who
Yes.
have you ever said good morning to that nobody says good morning back?
That's right. That's
Doesn't
absolutely
happen.
right. Yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Yeah, so right. And just listening to you, I just recall, my mornings that I just love to have my cup of tea and just sit on the steps and look into my garden and just like look at the greens out there, and just helps me actually to recharge my batteries. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
but sometimes I also feel, and I'm hearing you, but sometimes I feel you were talking about gratitude. Have you ever struggled on some of your days, when the days were really like challenging and hard, and to still feel grateful for? I sometimes struggle, because I get kind of like, I think anger kicks in with me. I feel really angry. Why is this happening to me? And then it just like, it goes down for a moment. And I just feel like I can't even feel grateful for something. And then I really have to think really hard, like, what is it that I feel grateful for? And then I start with something really simple. I have a bed I can sleep, or I have really like a roof over my head and I have a dry bed. Really start with something. And that actually then really brings back the grateful moments in my life. But sometimes it is really difficult to find these grateful moments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I have two children and sometimes, and they're teenagers. So they are inherently at the stage of life where they are just, it's all about them, and they're particularly selfish at times. And sometimes you absolutely like, oh, I'm just tearing my hair out. Why can't you just offer to put the washing up away for me? And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think again, like you, I've really had to then just dial it back and think, I'm not grateful for anyone in my family today because they're driving me absolutely crackers. So what is it I can be grateful for? And the same as you, exactly that. Quite often for me, the gratitude comes from when I can go to bed on my own, and I can switch out the light, and I can sleep, and I can get a good night's sleep. And sometimes, that's the only thing that you can be, I sometimes think that's the only thing I can be grateful for today. But you're absolutely right. There are days which are 100% sent to challenge all of us. And it's like I was just saying to you with, my things of when I have those really difficult days and I feel like I have a low mood, it's having my go-to checklist. What are the things? So get outside in nature, connect with people, eat healthy food, and probably exercise. I would put in that one as well. And it's the same on the days when I can't feel grateful and my family have driven me mad and I don't want to see them until I wake up tomorrow morning. What can I be grateful for? Well, I can always be grateful for a really comfy bed. As you say, you said the roof over your head and a dry bed. For me, it's like a comfy bed, peace and quiet to go to sleep, and an opportunity to recharge the body. And it's always having that in the back of the mind, that thinking, I have got things I can be grateful for.
Absolutely. As people are now wrapping up the year, are there any thoughts from your side that to inspire them or share with them, with our listeners, on how to wrap the year up on a good note, on a good food, so that they feel like it's been a good year despite all the challenges? Because a lot of people had a lot of challenges in 2025, and including myself and including yourself probably. And I just feel, so what could be really the most helpful one, do you feel, for people to wrap it up in a good way?
I think what I would say is that, life sometimes feels like it doesn't give you a break, and it's sent to challenge you. And I think being at peace with the fact that we as humans, we live in a world that we are not able physically to be able to keep pace with. And so life is going to be overwhelming and exhausting. And I think my reflections would be, it's even more challenging with AI coming and the conflicts that we have around the world. And so my reflections really on the year would be, there's a lot that's not within our control, but there is also a lot that is within our control. And quieten the noise. So quieten the noise of what's not within our control. So all the conflict happening in the world, the fears and anxieties around AI and what that means or doesn't mean for our futures. And really just focus not just on ourselves, but focus on connection at a human level. So don't disconnect and retreat into just connecting on technology. Have more real life experiences with people, connect with people, and whether that, as I said before, is just chatting to your barista who makes your coffee, or whether that's connecting with friends and family in person more. And I think that those would be my big reflections of, in a world that is overwhelming and exhausting, really dial back and think, what is my body and mind actually truly capable of? And how can I quieten the noise on the outside? And how can I dial it back so that I am bringing peace and harmony and balance into my life? And challenging myself as well. I always add that one in there, because that's how we grow as people. And that's not just sitting back and saying, I'm just going to focus on myself, and it's always all kind of introspective looking. It's looking out at the world, looking at what does the world need more of? What am I capable of giving to the world? How can I connect with the world? And, what am I physically enabled and capable of doing? And those would be the things that I would say, reflect on how far you've come in the year. And because quite often we don't do that. And sometimes you just need to even just scroll back through your photographs for the year and think, wow, gosh, was that really just 6 months ago? And it feels like a lifetime ago. And celebrate the things that you have achieved, the milestones that you've made, because they don't have to be huge, but it's to have moved forward, and knowing that brighter days are coming. It's what I always say. When we were on the ocean, we had some big storms we had to weather, and you feel like you're stuck in them for a really long time, but then the calm comes, the sunshine comes. We've had a lot of energetic things, again, out of our control energetically, through the solar system and what's been happening with all the planets and things this year. That's had all sorts of energy that we've all had to deal with. And so things are changing, and they will always change, but it's just being readily available for that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And maybe just as a follow-up question, because I feel that there is so much also in the underlying what you just shared is also trust. There is also this incredible trust. And how do you trust in the unknown when you don't know? I mean, looking at your experience that you had in the ocean, how did you develop that trust in this uncertainty of not knowing, will I get there? How will I get there? How much longer does it take? And so how did you do that?
That's a really interesting one. Again, I think there's an element of probably just I personally have this inherent nature of just keep going until you get there. And sometimes the exhaustion can come from like, well, when am I going to get there? Because I just don't know. But I think certainly as teammates, we trusted in each other, and we trusted in the foundations that we had built. We had a good boat. We had everything that was safe, that was going to keep us safe while at sea. And when we were in these massive storms, I didn't know whether things were going to break. I had Bella holding my hand one night saying, we're going to die, we're going to die. And I didn't know whether we were going to die. She'd been in a hurricane in her Atlantic crossing. She should know more so than me. I didn't know. But I trusted in my teammates that we had done all we could to make sure that we were safe. And I think probably the trust that we have to find as humans now is we have to trust that we are going to keep ourselves safe in a world that at times can feel unsafe. So where we have conflict, where, we've got unpredictable times, life is probably not going to be as we know it has been. And in the next 5-10 years, I don't know. I mean, I'm saying that without any knowledge of whether it will or not, but it feels uncertain in many ways. And so where we have to trust is we have to trust in and who we are. We have to trust that we will do all that we can to keep ourselves safe. And whether that's ourselves as individuals or ourselves as families. And that is all that we can do. And then the rest you have to ride. You have to ride it sometimes and trust that it will shift and it will change. And it may not shift and it may not change in the way you want. For me, that was COVID. I had a thriving business, and COVID came and completely wiped all of that out. That was never part of my plan. And that was never ever going to be what I had envisaged for my future. But the silver lining from that, and the lesson that came from that, is that I'm now got a career that is purpose driven. I'm passionate about it in a different way that I was passionate about what I did before. And that for me is the gift. I'm helping people. That's coming back to that Ikigai exercise I did. What does the world need more of? What can I do to help people in the world? And that was that for me was the trust that when things feel out of control, they feel out of control and you can't control it. But all you can try and do is keep yourself safe in that moment and trust that something is changing for a reason. And you may not have sight of that. It's a very, that's a difficult one to answer. And I can see why many of your listeners would probably struggle with, well, what am I trusting? Because you can't trust politicians. You can't trust the stability in the world. Where can you go in the world that makes you feel safe? And actually, maybe nowhere. But actually, it is that sense of, well, I have to do what I can to keep myself and my family or whoever it is, that feeling of safe. And then see what happens.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also very powerful then to shift from holding and letting go, because at some time, at some point in time, I feel that, you can hold on to that trust and do whatever is in your control, like what you said. But I think you also reach a point where it's about surrendering. And not surrender as giving up. Absolutely not. It's surrender about like surrender of having the need of that control, or having the need of knowing exactly of where this path is leading to. Sometimes surrendering can be really a bliss, because it can open up so many new paths that maybe you wouldn't have seen if you wouldn't have surrendered. So it can be quite healing and empowering as well. And I'm sure we could talk now another hour about like on how you applied that surrender as well on your journey. And maybe we just need to schedule another session.
Sure. Sure.
We are coming to an end for today, and I couldn't be more grateful. Before we actually wrap up for the session today, I wanted to ask you the question that I ask each of our guests as well, is like, you have one day to yourself, one full day to yourself. What would you do with that day, P?
Oh, well, I think I probably alluded to some of it earlier. For me, nature is such a healer, and I'm not shy of a challenge or two. So I think if I had a day to myself, I would go and do some kind of challenge, not even challenge, but just a day, whether it's hiking nature or I'd spend it out on a boat on the water. And then I would, with friends, obviously, and then I'd have some kind of lovely, nourishing food along the way, and probably wrap it up with some kind of nice spoiling massage or something that's kind of feels very nourishing and self-care. But always with friends and family. But yeah, anywhere outside in nature, doing some kind of, hike or swim or on a boat, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, sounds like an amazing plan, and just wanting to go off now and do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for all your sharings. It's been such a privilege to have you here today, and to listen to you just makes me really feel so inspired about like things that we feel it's impossible to do it, and then take it step by step, like what you said, and eat the big elephant in small pieces and make it happen. I think there are so many things that we can actually make happen in our life if we tune down and just go slower and take it piece by piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and have a wonderful Christmas with your loved ones. And we shall be connected again in the new year.
Lovely.
Thank
you
you
so much.
Thank
Happy
you so
Christmas.
Wow, I don't know how you feel, but I could go on and on and on. There are so many topics that I would have loved to discuss with you, but as time is ticking. And as I know that sometimes we need a little pause in between, I just hope that I can get P back on my podcast for another episode. As we come to the end of today, I want to take a moment really, not just to reflect on what was said, but on what was felt. Sitting with P always reminds me that true strength doesn't shout. It listens, and it softens, and it keeps choosing kindness even when life is demanding. What I so deeply admire about Purusha Gordon is not just what she has achieved, but how she lives. With humility, with compassion, and with an unwavering belief in people, even when they struggle to believe in themselves. Her journey from that woman standing on her porch, feeling disconnected from her body and her confidence, to rowing across an ocean and breaking a world record is not about proving anything to the world. This is about what becomes possible when we decide not to give up on ourselves. And I hope that as you listen, something in her story has gently landed for you too. And if you feel that this could be helpful to anyone you know, please continue to share, as we want to everyone know out there that they are not alone. So especially if you're in a season of adversity, if you're facing something that feels heavy, uncertain, or impossibly hard, if you're still mid-ocean, rowing without yet seeing land, let this be your reminder. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to keep showing up, one small stroke at a time. And if you'd like to learn more about Purusha's work, whether for personal inspiration, workshops, events, or to engage her as a motivational speaker, I warmly encourage you, and especially those of you listening from corporate or organizational settings, please visit purushagordon.com. Her work around resilience, mindset, well-being, and leadership is deeply impactful and truly transformative. P, I can't thank you enough, not just for your achievements, but for your heart, your honesty, and the love you so freely bring into every space you enter. I feel incredibly grateful to call you a friend. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking this time to pause, reflect, and breathe at the end of the year. I wish you all a gentle Christmas, one filled with kindness towards yourself, trust in your journey, and faith that even in the hardest moments, you are still moving forward. So, beautiful, gentle Christmas to all of you, and I shall see you next week for another episode on Your Fertility Counselor. See you then. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fertility Counselor podcast. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. If you need support or have any questions, reach out to us via email at inquiries@counselingconnects.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Fertility Connects. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to learn more about us and the services we offer, head to www.fertilityconnects.com. And if you're looking for support beyond fertility, visit www.counselingconnects.com. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.